ICE is moving forward with its plan to convert warehouses across the country into mass immigration detention centers. It is doing so despite active lawsuits from multiple states. A brand new inspector general probe into whether the government overpaid for the buildings. And just this week, a Georgia town of fewer than 5,500 people suing to stop a facility for 10,000 detainees from opening up in their backyard. A town, by the way, that gave Donald Trump nearly 3/4 of their vote in 2024. Joining us now is Andrea Flores, founder of Securing America's Promise and former DHS official in the Obama administration. Andrea, thanks for coming on set this morning.
Thank you.
This $38 billion plan, there's going to be in 11 towns, 8 states, and holding detainees for up to 60 days before they are deported. What is the end game for the administration when you look at the outlines of this plan?
I mean, the end game is to deport as many people as possible. But more importantly, the end game is to make these detention facilities as miserable and as inhumane as possible. So that way people voluntarily self-deport, making their job in many ways easier. We've seen that in the existing detention facilities. The conditions are not up to any standards. We're seeing deaths hit new records. We're seeing basic medical care. And so there's no way in the current plans that I have seen that they can keep people safe. And 60 days is too much. And they're using detention as a punishment. And that is not an appropriate use of detention. And we should be really concerned about this expansion right now.
Because detention is not supposed to be punitive. They're not supposed to be treated as if they're in jail.
Yes.
To your point, USA Today wrote about the conditions worsening at California immigration detention centers. At multiple facilities, detainees reported overcrowding, undercooked food, inadequate clothing, and poor access to clean drinking water, Rob Bonta said. That's what you hear from everybody who's gone in, talked to anyone that's been in those facilities. But these communities that voted for Trump organized against this for a lot of reasons. They don't want to be the location where these kinds of things are happening. They're big and ugly. Like, there's a lot of reasons why people did it. What does it tell you that there's such a gap between the immigration politics that Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and Markwayne Mullin, the new DHS secretary, are doing, and the on-the-ground reality with how even his voters are taking this all in?
Well, to me, it means they're so deeply committed to their extreme agenda still, even though there seems to be a narrative growing that Secretary Markwayne Mullin is de-escalating, doing things more professionally than Noam.
Or quietly.
You can do things quietly, and you can still have an extreme political agenda. And so they don't seem to care about any part except their most extreme, members of their base.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. There's bipartisan opposition to these warehouses. They do not care. Right, because what they care is about getting their numbers, and they want to change the demographics of this country. It is a project to change demographics. They're doing that in voting rights. They're doing that here with immigration. These are all connected issues, and now we have a new face of the problem, and they can keep blaming Noam. But there is so much corruption also in these plans, which the American people, I think, are going to continue to reject. I mean, billions of dollars. People are losing food stamps, and we're building warehouse detention centers so you can send senior citizens to go be detained for 60 days.
Yeah.
Like, that's what the president is doing.
Speaking of senior citizens, the Associated Press reported on May 12th, 85-year-old French widow caught in Trump's immigration crackdown describes her detention. She was held in a dormitory-style room with 58 other women, mostly mothers, quote, "Some of them didn't know where their children were," she said. "I think it's terrible for a woman not to know where her children are." But also in the story was this that jumped out at me. Everybody was talking so loudly so everybody could hear what they were saying. But when silence came, you could hear children crying and even babies crying, she said. "There's babies in this jail."
So that is a policy choice that this country does not need to make. Children cannot be safely detained. And pediatricians have come out and said this. Multiple public health experts have said the lifelong trauma those children will face is a policy choice we're making when alternatives exist. Right. You can enforce immigration law and not put families in detention. And they want us to believe that that is the normal. And I am concerned about a lot of Democrats, I think, are doing a really good job of highlighting the stories of detention. But what is the next step? because when you get someone out of detention, there's no path to stability, legal status, or options for them. They're probably eventually going to go back to detention. So detention is just one stop on a path that has to still be fixed. And so you have to see it in the context of it's one part of the abuse these families will face. But you do not need to detain families. There are alternatives that are legal, that are safe, and that also help people comply.
Can we talk a little bit more about this? I'm obviously not as steeped in the literature and sort of the research around this, but a story that I read yesterday that I shared with everyone that was really harrowing is a woman who was detained and asked to keep her baby. That was not heeded by the immigration officers. Her 2-year-old was left with an abusive uncle because that was the only family member still in the United States who was available to take care of him. And the uncle went on to abuse him and kill him and is now being charged with negligent homicide, amongst other things, sexual battery. Really, really horrible story by Maria Chetty at the Washington Post. So what are the other options? I mean, if I were a mom, even if it was probably a worst-case scenario, if I were a mom who were being detained and it was worst-case scenario to bring my child with me, I would still want to.
Absolutely. I mean, parents should choose. And if a parent decides they want to stay with their child, there are ways to do that without having to be detained. Right? So that's step one. If a parent chooses to leave the country, why is that child not allowed to go with that mother? That was a preventable tragedy. I mean, we will look back on some of these stories as some of the greatest human rights kind of consequences that we all contributed to. And that child should be alive today. And so, but when you're trying to hit thousands of numbers and you're trying to hit a number of 1 million in a year, you don't have the time to do what old, ICE policies would have allowed, which was to say, let's wait. Let's make sure you can be reunited with your child, and then you can go with your child. They don't seem to be doing any of that due diligence. They don't take the fact that people have minor children into account. There's more reporting that they're marking that people do not have children. I mean, there are still thousands of children not reunited with their families from the first Trump administration. And that is a policy problem, and it's a governing problem for future Democrats if they have power again.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, but of course, and sadly, you will be back. We will have you back to talk more about this. Andrea Flores, thank you.
Thank you.